Alright guys, welcome back to our 1967 Ford Cummins build. And quick recap, 1967 Ford F100 was a short bed, now it's a long bed. Frame, 2012 Ram 3500. The drivetrain, axles, engine, trans transfer case is 1998 Ram 3500. It is a P-pump 5-speed setup, so it's the 215 horse pump. It's everything I wanted. So in the last video, we got our engine mounts in, we got 2 of our cab mounts done. We still have to do these core supports. The bed is sitting where it needs to be. We got to make mounts for that. So let's just jump right in and keep going. All right, so if we look under here, you can see where I shortened the frame. You can see our rear cab mounts. And then here's our A-pillar mounts. So now we got to get these done. And if we come up front here under the core support, you can see the factory Ford ones end up inside the frame rails, which is not where I want them to be. They're kind of in the way. The factory Dodge ones are way outboard and honestly, not even under the truck because I'm going to have to shorten this frame. So we got a bunch of work to do here. But I've really been trying to use the factory Cummins cooling package. I want to use that factory 12-valve radiator and mechanical fan because I want to tow with this thing and I don't trust an electric fan to really keep up with it. So I've got this shroud kind of shoved down in here. It's kind of around the fan. And one of my big concerns in one of the other videos was clearance to the steering gear here, which this is the shroud. I think we're actually gonna be okay. So what I'm gonna do now, but I guess, yeah, on that, if we look down here, it's kind of hard to tell. Let me get a flashlight. Oh, so that's our factory mount, and there's this brace here, and the cooling shroud is out here. So all of this is going to have to get cut off. This brace, that brace, we're gonna have to gut all that out. We'll have to add strength back in, but that mount's gotta go. So yeah, I'm gonna try to get, I think the first thing we're gonna do is try to get the nose up to where it needs to be. It's kind of sagged out and at an angle because the front is not the stiffest on this cab. We'll jack it up here. We'll figure out where those need to go. We'll start cutting and try to get that radiator fit. Once we have that, then we can figure out where to put our front cab mounts. We're gonna have to move them, I know that. This core support's pretty sturdy, so I think I can move them outboard and so I can fit that radiator and it'll be good. Maybe I'll plate them. We'll see how it goes. My goodness, that was a lot of cutting. I really had to cut into the inner fenders here, which is fine. I'm not worried about it. But I've got the radiator in. It's a little tight to the motor. Can't really see it here, but it's got about a 1/2 inch to the radiator, from the fan to the radiator, which I'd like a little more. I can always space the fan back on the fan clutch because I've got good clearance to the fan clutch. But what I think I'm gonna do is, if you look at this radiator, she's seen better days. Like, this thing is rough. So I think I'm gonna get an aftermarket aluminum because it's really hard to tell. Really hard to tell. Yeah. But it is, yeah, you can't see. But down in here, if you could see, way down on the, oh, you can see the little bit there. The tank here is actually hitting the core support and holding it back. And I think if I go with a little bit, if I go with an aftermarket aluminum, it'll be a little bit thinner and I can slide it forward. And it's the same story on this side, but it fits really, really nice. I'm super happy with that. And I really want to run the mechanical fan and the big radiator. And the other advantage to this is, like, my radiator hoses are just going to be Dodge radiator hoses. If I ever blow a radiator hose on the road, just go to the parts store and get one. Radiator, same thing. And mechanical fan will move more air than all but probably the most expensive brushless aftermarket fans. So I'm really happy with this. This is going to work out. It is sitting awfully low. Like, the radiator is pretty much on the frame, so I might have to notch the frame there. But with that, we can figure out where we're going to put these, because these need to get moved rearward. And I'm not sure exactly what I'm going to do it, but when I figure it out, I'll let you guys know. Fully sitting on the body mounts now. So here's my front mounts. They were out here. I cut them off, flipped them around, trimmed them up. and tucked them to the inside. Again, they're just kind of partially welded just to make sure, you know, just in case I got to move them or something doesn't work out right. So I ended up putting them right here, which is basically where they were, just forward a few inches. And I trimmed up the mounts a little bit in the back to give myself a little bit more clearance to the radiator. But as you can see, everything is very tight. But weight's sitting on it. I'm really happy with these. The frame rails are probably going to get cut right about where they're at here, because all this is extra. I just got to figure out where to put the bumper. And there's a little valance that comes down here that'll cover these up, so you'll never see them. So that is, feels good to have all the body mounts on. Preparation for the bed and the rear suspension. This is the crappy part. I cut off all of these extra brackets and clean this frame up because I'm not using any of the suspension stuff, so that's all got to go. And yeah, you can see back here too, this is where I had to trim that bracket down because it's actually, the bed sits flush on this. So I'm gonna have to clean this up and just weld across here because it's gotta sit flush on there, but that'll make that work. It was kicked up like this, that was in the way. But time to cut all of these brackets off. This is going to suck. All right, I'll apologize for this video kind of being all over the place, but really, I've been all over the place with this because I had to figure out the rear suspension, which I have a really trick setup that you'll see later that I'm gonna do. But trying to make it fit was absolutely mind-numbingly painful. I've spent days planning this out. So I've been kind of bouncing around with little stuff as I've kind of needed to do it. So let me get you guys caught up here. So first off, I got all the brackets cut off. So everything is cut off this frame. You can see all my leaf spring mounts, my shock mounts, everything is off. It's all cleaned up. It looks much, much nicer. There's giant remnants of brackets kind of all over. So that took a ton of time. That was about 2 days of, I mean, you can see I swept the floor before I started, and just look at all the grinding dust. Between the plasma cutter, the Sawzall, and the grinder, that was like 2 full days. But it turned out really nice. I'm really happy with the way the frame rails came out. And I welded in, you know, I had this that I needed, so I welded that back in. Threw some paint on it just so that stuff doesn't rust. And then beyond that, I got my trans mount in, which you can see with the way I mounted the engine, I actually had to come up off that trans cross member. That trans cross member is out of, I think, a 3rd gen with a 48 RE. I don't know. I bought it from a junkyard. It fit. It was a good starting point. So I ended up having to build it up, and then I had to plasma some holes in the bottom to get to the bolts. But it worked out really nice. So I'm really, really happy with that. And in the front, I didn't get anything done. I did order a new radiator because my plan is going to be, this is old. This is probably the original radiator from this thing. And it, obviously it's pretty rough, but they don't make these anymore. So this is not an aluminum radiator. So the aluminum ones are thinner, and right now I'm actually into the motor, or the fan is into the radiator. So I ordered an aftermarket all aluminum to hopefully tuck this thing up. Once we get that, then we can make some mounts for that. But that's kind of where it stands right now. I did order everything for the rear suspension, so that's probably going to take a few days to come in. There's some pretty bad stuff on the west side of the state, and that's going to delay my order a little bit, but there's a hint as what it's going to be in the rear. But it's not going to be anything normal or conventional. I guarantee you that. All right, back on the radiator. I got the giant stock one out. So this is a 3-core aluminum. You can see it's a lot thinner than the one I had. So it gave me a little extra room. It all fits amazing. Stock radiator hoses, top and bottom. So if I'm on the road and I blow a radiator hose, they're stock. Coolant bottle even fits. Fan shroud, mechanical fan, so I should have plenty of cooling. I need to put some riv nuts in here to hold that, and then it worked out because since I cut out those mounts that are on the back side and moved them forward, I ended up dropping down, and these are the factory Dodge radiator mounts. So I have the rubber isolator, the bracket, everything. I just cut them up and welded them outside the frame. So the top of the radiator is attached to the body, the bottom is attached to the frame, but with these really stiff bushings, I don't think I'm gonna have an issue with that, especially since these upper bushings are so big. So I think this is gonna work really, really nice. I do need to, when I pull the radiator out, you can see I've got all this that's covered up. I'm gonna need to trim the core support back just to make sure I get all my airflow. But I'm gonna get some really nice airflow. I should probably add a filler plate up here just to close this off, but that's gonna work awesome. It does need to get painted black. I hate the aluminum look, but when it's the only thing that fits, it's the only thing that fits. So these brackets down here, I'm going to, just like everything else, I'll plate them up, I'll brace them when I get the truck tore apart. But right now, it's just like everything else. Get it mocked up, get it tacked in, make sure it's gonna fit. Clears the steering gear, so I've got just a little bit of room there. I mean, it fits really, really nice. I'm super happy with this. The only thing I don't like about this radiator is it doesn't, I mean, I only have 2 bolts in, but the other one had these little tabs that dropped into the radiator on the fan shroud. This one doesn't, so that kind of sucks, but we'll see. I can always drill a hole here and put a zip tie if I really need to, but like I said, I've only got 2 out of 4 bolts in. So it's coming along, and now to keep the randomness going, I'm gonna go to the fuel tank. So back here, this stud right here, that is for the front fuel tank strap, and then right here, this one, is for the rear. So I could probably go get a stock fuel tank for 2012 Ram 3500. However, I took out a bunch of frame right there, and the transfer case is right there. So I don't know if that would work, and that would cost money, and I'm cheap. What I do have is this fuel tank. This is the original fuel tank out of my 2017 Ram 2500. It's a 32 gallon, and the reason I have it here sitting on the floor is I put a Titan 52 in that thing because we do a lot of hauling, and 32 gallons was not enough. So I have actually test fit this in this truck, and I think it'll work. It kind of tucks up in there, so I bought fuel tank straps for this frame. We're gonna see if it works, and I mean, when I say I think it fits, it literally goes almost to that transfer case. Like, I cannot put a bigger fuel tank in than this 32 gallon. I'd love to have more, but 32 should be good. But it does get into this cross member right here. That radius on the inside of that cross member hits the fuel tank. So I'm gonna need to cut that out right now. I'm just gonna have to notch it back and down, you'll see that. And then we can test fit that fuel tank again and see if it'll work. And then if that does, we'll have to plate that back in. But I would like to get the fuel tank at least somewhat mounted before we move on to the rear suspension, because I don't want to put something that ends up in the fuel tank later. So I'm going to cut that out, and then we'll test fit this fuel tank and see what we get. Good thing I decided to test fit it and not just start cutting, because it does actually clear. There's no issue there. So that's up and flush, but I'm probably going to have to fill that gap in up top right there. So that has something to compress up against, because what they do is they sandwich in here. You can see the rear one's in there, and that fits around the cross member really nice, so they didn't change that. But on the mega cab, there was a hanger here, so I'm gonna have to go forward and make something work there. But you can see there's not a whole lot of room. There's just enough room that I could pull that transfer case off without dropping the fuel tank. But that's 32 gallons of diesel, which should be really nice with this truck. Let me figure out how I'm going to get that mount, that strap to work, because it's not the right shape, it's not the right length. You know, sometimes you got to make custom fuel straps. It's just what happens. Sitting in there like it should. There's no jack under it. So what I do have is 2 2x4s up here, just to add that space to make it sit flush. So I'm going to have to add a 3-inch metal spacer up here, or something up there to make it hold tight. But if we look, it is flush with the bottom of the frame rail. So what I had to do was rebend this entire front strap, and I got it to work, and then it was about 4.5 inches too short. So I put in this piece of channel just to see if it was gonna work. And it looks really nice. I'm really happy with it. I gotta cut that, clean that up, because that looks like total garbage, but I just wanted to see if this would work, and I'm really happy with how all this fits in here. It doesn't actually hit the frame anywhere, but I do have to build a spacer up there. This is gonna work. I'm happy with this. I need to get this out and clean it up, but at least for now, the fuel tank is temporarily mounted. So yeah, this is turning out pretty nice. I'm really happy with it. All right, guys, it's been a few weeks since I've had a chance to work on this thing. Unfortunately, this is kind of my lowest priority right now. I wish I could work on this thing full time because I really want to drive it, but can't, so it kind of keeps getting pushed to the back burner. But a few more things we're gonna do here. First thing I want to clean up are those 2x4s that are shoved in there. So what I've got is a piece of 4x3 quarter wall. Yeah, quarter wall. Didn't really need quarter wall, but this was honestly the cheapest piece I could get. That was 3 inches, and I wanted as much width as I could. Well, I guess it'll. So I wanted as much width as I could to really support that tank down there. So let me get that out of there. We'll get this thing up in there. See how it works out. 2x4s are gone. That fits in there really nice. Just gotta tack it in. So that'll create the nice little sandwich there. That'll work out perfect. Fits in there really nice. Now the last thing I want to do is get some mounts under the bed here. So I'm going to lower this down, and then like I talked about building some cross members across here, because I want to make sure that I support this bed well enough on the cross members. I mean, on the Ford, it literally only sits on kind of these spots, but because I want this thing to haul, and yeah, we'll address the Swiss cheese later. I've got a plan for that too. But I want this thing to be really solid, so I think I'm actually going to build some cross members to make sure that the front of this bed is supported really well. But let me lower this down, and then we'll figure out what we're going to do. This turned out really nice. So this first cross member, we'll pick up that first cross member. It'll sit on it flush, and then I can actually use those bolt holes. They'll go straight through here. This one sits just in front of it and actually a little bit lower, so it kind of works out that it doesn't hit it. But this one, we'll grab the second one and go all the way across. So that'll support the whole front of the bed all the way across. And then I'm still going to need to build some little stands here and there for the next 2 cross members. And yeah, that's going to work out really nice. These are up out of the way. They're not anywhere near the fuel tank. So that's going to work out nice. And then I did also tack in my fuel tank mount. So yeah, this was a long period of time to get all this done, but it's good progress. Come back next time because we're doing a rear suspension. That's going to be really cool. I'm excited for that. But I wanted to make sure I had this stuff in here before I start thinking about a rear suspension. But hell yeah, we're doing that next.